Welcome to Nantucket Community Television's election coverage for 2020. I'm Charlie Walters, and I'm pleased to have with me right now Congressman Bill Keating, who is the incumbent 9th District Congressman for the 9th District of Massachusetts. And he's also the Democratic candidate for re-election. Bill, thank you for doing this.
Charlie, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and appreciate what you're doing to keep people informed.
Tell us why you want to remain in Congress.
Well, I think that people are aware. I think every term, which is every 2 years for Congress, people are saying this is the most important election in our country's history. Well, this time it's real. Even the historians are saying this might be the most important, at least it's the most important for over 100 years of American history. There's so much at stake right now. We're at a pivotal point, and certainly on the larger sense, which applies to all of us, healthcare remains a top priority. We're dealing with probably the worst crisis, the worst non-military crisis we've had in 100 years with the COVID-19 virus. I've been intimately involved in trying to tailor that for the needs of our district in particular and help everyone. And then also, we're facing, in the midst of this, particularly with a switch in the court, something that couldn't be done legislatively, the elimination, perhaps, of the Affordable Care Act, which has ramifications of over 20 million people losing their health insurance, pre-existing condition coverage being taken away, the right to have coverage for opioid addiction, the right for women not to be charged more than men. So we have these major issues that are occurring nationwide. In our own district, we're very fragile in so many respects, trying to deal with the issues of climate change. And we've been involved, and I hope in the course of this we'll get a chance to talk about some specifics in that regard for Nantucket. But much is at stake right now. If I have the chance to take whatever knowledge I've garnered through my experience, and apply that to public service to take us through these times, it's something I'd welcome and something I think that would benefit the district.
Let's stick with some local issues. You mentioned climate change, and the 9th District in Massachusetts probably has more coastline than any other district in the state, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us about your efforts and the federal efforts, as far as they go, to combat climate change in this part of the Commonwealth. Well,
Charlie, it's interesting. I've been told that I have the most coastline of any congressional district in the country.
Really?
We look at the coastline and deal with it there. So certainly we're very involved in the issues that affect local climate change issues. I also am chair of the subcommittee that deals with global climate change issues in the environment, so that I understand that this issue isn't localized. The U.S. can't go it alone. But in terms of our own district, obviously the effects on the coastal erosion issues are very real. Flooding is real. Trying to deal with the dredging issues and how that's been affected. Some of the commercial issues like fishing are affected as well. Dredging is a big issue. Just a few years ago, most people don't know it because we didn't advertise it for tourism reasons and Chamber of Commerce, but we were almost in a situation where the harbor was in such a condition that we were told by the ferries, the High Line and the Steamship Authority, they had about a foot of carry left, and they were in fear of it being canceled. And the Army Corps, which we've had developed great relationships with transferred some of the work somewhere else to deal with this emergency. So we've dealt with that. There's $10.5 million investment by the Army Corps ultimately to have access to the harbor. That was a big issue, and it's a big price tag, but it was so necessary for the being a lifeline to the island. The dredging continues, but these issues affect us more than you could imagine. And also just before we deal with climate change alone, some of the things that are going on in Washington and with this administration really are serious. They have moved so that there can be offshore gas and oil drilling off our coast. And we passed legislation in the House to prohibit that. But this is something that was real with this administration that was going. We've been able to hold it off I think Florida is sensitive because of electoral concerns, so the administration slowed down there, create an exemption, but not for us. So it's something that we face all the time in terms of this administration. They're saying they're freeing up regulations. What they're doing is doing away with protections that affect groundwater supply and our environment, air quality, and things that are important to us in our region to keep it special for our way of life and for tourism, which is one of our largest, economic industries.
Well, the ferry service over here is obviously of utmost importance. Nantucket Sound is our Route 3 or Route 6, if you will. Okay. And they've been having some financial issues for obvious reasons, COVID, and the state has had similar issues. If it were to come to that, should there be a continuing part of the federal stimuluses to help fund the Steamship Authority?
Well, as you know, Charlie, that the Steamship Authority was just weeks away from running out of funding during the COVID-19 crisis because their revenues were down, because their ridership was down. And before COVID ever happened, I worked with Tom Cahere, who's the Regional Transit Administrator in these parts. And we worked at the end of last year, beginning of this year, so that service would include highline carrying service as well, and be included in designating this as a commuter service federally. Why is that important? Well, it was going to bring in $3 million annually to begin with. But because of the CARES Act, that major response we had to the COVID-19 pandemic and the stimulus package that came from that, we were able to designate monies there and improve the amount of monies in that pocket of funds. And that created another 9 million plus. So the combination was $12 million to keep it going. And that was critical. And we were able to do that with a House-led initiative that became law, and the funding saved the day, frankly, for dealing with that. So it's a challenge a day with so many issues, but that was one that's pure lifeline to Nantucket. And it's something, the commuter portion and the funding of that will continue going forward. And we're gonna work, if we face another emergency like that, with a stimulus bill to continue to deal with that.
Part of your work in Washington involves being on the shellfish caucus, which obviously is of great interest in Nantucket. Tell us about the work of the shellfish caucus.
Well, I think what we see is a couple of things happening. We have in the New Bedford part of my district, per dollar yield, we are the largest in the country, and it's mostly because of scallops. And that's so critical to our economy here. The other thing that's happening, and it's one of the fastest growing industries in our region, is aquaculture. So that's another part of dealing with this that can be, I think, an economic boom going forward. It was growing at 22% a year as a new industry. So there's reasons to be involved here. What we do in the caucuses is part of it is a promotional effort. It's to give a louder voice, to work with the chamber type issues, to try and be a force multiplier for marketing industries that are in our district. And it's also there, should there be issues that come forward that create problems. So there's a coalition in place of congressional members so we can deal with those individual issues. So it's been helpful. The issues are sometimes unique, but that's the purpose of caucuses largely in Congress. It's to have the ability to have a coalition in place ready to go, and for each of us in the national sense, but also in the local sense, to be able to be promoters of that industry and help in marketplace issues.
Another issue on Nantucket that has Washington involvement as well is H-2B visas.
Oh.
And what is the status of H-2B visas in the United States at this point?
Well, that's an issue we could do a whole show on. Our office is at the center of it. I'm in the center of it. I put together a coalition around this issue, a bipartisan one, dealing with it. Now, to us, it's critical. For the people that are listening that may not understand, H-2B visas and J-1 visas are also used in Nantucket as well. It's an opportunity for people to get a temporary visa to come, work, and they return. It's worked well. It's been essential for our hospitality industry, for restaurants and lodging areas. They can't get enough people here. And it's compounded by being a seasonal industry, because year-round, there's certainly not enough here, and it spikes during the summer and the shoulder seasons. We need people. If we don't have people to fill those jobs, the people that are working locally don't have those jobs. If we don't have people to fill those jobs, these restaurants curtail their hours and their revenues. So here's the status now. President Trump has shut down visas. He shut down all visas. And he views it, even though he's in the business himself, I'm sure he's had his visas for his resorts. He shut down J-1s and H-2B visas. There were existing ones in place, and they've been able to be utilized. Our office has helped in that regard. But we need, this is something that causes such unpredictability. I sat down many times with Nantucket restaurant owners, people that are doing lodging, and every year we go from crisis to a crisis. That's accentuated under the Trump administration. They have changed the rules of the game 3 different times. And every time they're adjusting to whether it's a lottery, different types of priorities, the timing that's in place. Businesses, small businesses, they have to plan at least a year ahead of time to have a business plan. And this has caused great disruption. Now, under President Bush and President Obama, when there was a greater need for these H-2B visas, what they did is they raised the cap on the workers, we call them returning workers, that go back and forth. They're important because they're already trained, often go to the same restaurants, and they have a proven record going back and forth back to their country. That was working. The latest interruptions, where they're looking at this as part of an immigration plan, have been extremely cumbersome to businesses. In fact, it's had the result of slowing down the operations of those businesses. With a new administration hopefully coming into place, one of my top priorities is to work to get a plan where businesses will know 3 to 5 years ahead of time what the rules of the game are, that they're able to function that way. And our office has been an amazing conduit. If you talk to anyone on the island, they'll tell you, at helping them navigate through some of the difficulties that are there. What I'm trying to do now with an administration that won't be so centered on viewing this issue as an immigration issue instead of a business issue is to say, let's work together to get the uncertainty out of that decision. Let people know where they stand and they can plan for that. So I talked a lot about it, but it's that big an issue and it's that much of a concentration in our office. I have a person that centers on that full-time in the district, in the Hyannis office, and I have someone in DC, and they spend a large amount of their time on this issue, and I do too. So it's been a struggle, and it's been an unnecessary problem. Yet I think with the new administration, we're going to be able to square that away.
You also serve on the House Armed Services Committee, and you're on a subcommittee of that committee. And I want to make sure I get this right. This is for intelligence and emerging threats and capabilities. Do I have that worded correctly?
That's true.
Okay. How much of a threat are foreign actors in this year's election? People in Russia or China or Iran or whatever. How much of a problem is this?
Well, I have a dual responsibility there because I'm chairman of the Subcommittee on Foreign Affairs that deals with Europe and Eurasia. So that includes Russia. And Russia is the actor that's been involved in our election. Now, you're going to hear this in this campaign, oh, there's other countries involved. Well, the fact is, the country that's directly involved in interfering and meddling in this election is Russia. And they have continued to do that. They were there in 2016. The U.S. intelligence is clear about it, and they've continued. The FBI director just recently said this is ongoing and escalating. Yet here's a story that's worth repeating, because it shows you the difficulty this administration has with Russia. We, through our intelligence and our Homeland Security intelligence, were finding out that Russia was putting out misinformation through social networking and in a multiplying way. That Joe Biden was suffering from mental illness, for instance. That was the issue. Our Homeland Security intelligence, heading into this election, wanted to go forward with that information, alert voters that this is misinformation coming from Russia. Yet the White House stopped our own Homeland Security intelligence from going out with that information until it was leaked out, and we've dealt with it. So we have a threat in this election, and I think that people will be somewhat relieved that we're making protections on some of the work that's being done by Russia. It's the GRU, it's their new version of the KGB that's behind it. Putin is directly involved in organizing this and giving it direction. So it remains a real threat. They were in our equipment in 2016. There's no information that they changed any of the votes by doing that, but in 2 counties at least in the country, they were there, and there's concern whether or not some of that hacking can take place as well. But it is a concern, it remains a concern. I held a hearing in my subcommittee with European leaders who have been fighting this longer than we have, and who had just gone through their elections, and the Russians were involved doing the same thing there. And we tried to do it as lessons learned, yet the outcome was we don't have a strong policy about that. So there's a blind spot with this administration somehow with Russia in so many respects. But indeed, they're doing this and they're trying to disrupt our democracy. I think they clearly, our intelligence said they had a favored candidate in 2016. They do this year. Our intelligence is telling us that. Yet their ultimate goal is to create the seed of democracy, not being fair, not having free and fair elections. And that's what they've done in other countries as well. It's a real threat. It's ongoing. We're dealing with it, not as strongly as we should.
Just in the last day or two, some of the leading epidemiologists have been saying that it's going to be the next 3 to 6 months that are maybe the worst part of the pandemic. Do you accept that, first of all? And do you think there should be a national mask mandate?
Well, we're already seeing that. That's already happened. That third wave is happening. They were predicting as the fall approached that we would have another wave. It's hitting the Midwest of this country extremely hard right now. But they're concerned with the Northeast because this is the seasons are changing. It's getting colder, and people are going to go indoors. And the information that we have on this disease, which we're still learning, is that it's more of a threat indoors than it is outdoors, being concentrated. So that, and families getting together, in some instances, college and school age young people, we've learned they're transmitters, even though that some of them don't have the severity all the time that older people or people with pre-existing conditions do. And yet we know we're going for this. So the question isn't, will we have this occur? It's already occurring, and the numbers are frightening. And in terms of the masks, people like Dr. Fauci, other experts in the area, many of whom are from Massachusetts, they're saying that if we don't act strongly in trying to contain it the way we can now, that they're estimating over 30 or 40,000 people might be dead that otherwise wouldn't be in this country by the end of the year if we don't take those actions. It's hard to have a national mask requirement. I think that we have to look at where masks are appropriate and where they're not. If people aren't socially distanced, then yes, they should have a mask. If they're socially distanced, no, they don't need a mask. If you're going into stores or anything like that, you should have a mask. And that should be a national standard. It's going to be enforced locally, but we've been sending the wrong message. I don't know, Charlie, have you heard the excerpts of the Bob Woodward tape with the president?
Yes.
Well, it's clear he knew
Horrifying.
in January that this was a problem. And he said he knew it was airborne. He knew it was lethal. He knew it was worse than the flu. Yet he was, in his own words, downplaying this to the American public. He was more concerned about the stock market going up and his polling numbers going up than he was about the infection rate and the death rate going up. It has been mismanaged. We're about 4% of the of the world's population, but we have over 20% of the deaths from this disease. And this is America. So it's just unquestionable. It's been mismanaged. And we need a national approach. One of the things we're working on in the House right now, in the time period that this will be aired, is making sure that there's proper testing from a national plan and contact tracing from that testing nationally. And we have testing that'll be rapid enough so that it makes a difference. We have to find out where the outbreaks occur quickly. We have to be able to contain it, and we have to move quickly. Now, Nantucket has had a spike recently as well. And that's a real concern because prior to that, everything had been going much better than the rest of the country. But I think that told us just how quickly things can change and how just a few incidents of this infection and breakout can spill over and affect more people. And the difficulty that Nantucket had is not dissimilar to what's happening around the country, that there wasn't enough in place to have immediate contact tracing and to find out what was going on. There wasn't a system that was helpful. And so a national approach is required. A natural approach for the Defense Production Act, and I'm on the Armed Services Committee, is so necessary. We found ourselves in this country caught short of, protective equipment for professionals and healthcare officials. Not enough masks, not enough gowns, not enough testing devices. We turned away 250,000 testing kits that the World Health Organization offered to this country that we could have used. So we need a national approach. As local schools are sitting there and states are sitting there trying to come up with a plan for getting young people back to school, you need national standards and resources available. Some of the resources from CARES 2 and some of my district communities have already been used to have the disinfectants and the right equipment in schools. And some of my towns that have limited openings have said they wouldn't have done it without that assistance. So long answer for our crisis issue, but the issue is our national government has expended funds, but not smartly. They've pushed the responsibility to the states where they weren't equipped to do what the national government could do. It's been a failure, and we have to turn that around. Disconcerting times, but I appreciate your candid assessment. Bill Keating, thank you for coming by today. We appreciate your taking the time. Good luck with your campaign. And Charlie, thank you, and perhaps we can do it again in the future. I hope so. Thank you. For Nantucket Community Television's 2020 election coverage, I'm Charlie Walters. Thanks for tuning in. Please join us again.